A boy, no older than 10, steps through the arched stone doorway, into the great kitchens of Hampton Court Palace. It's his first morning, as a turnspit. He expects grandeur. He finds hell. The heat hits him first, a physical wall that stops him mid-step. Then, the smoke, thick and greasy, stinging his eyes, until they water. The roar comes next, 6 massive fires crackling in walk-in fireplaces, each one tall enough for a grown man to stand inside. Wood splits, and pops. Fat drips from spitted oxen, and explodes into flame. Somewhere in the chaos, a cook is shouting orders. Metal clangs, against stone. And then, the smell. Not the rich aroma of roasting meat you imagine at a royal feast. This is different. Sharper. The reek of burning animal fat, mixed with wood smoke, and sweat. And something else underneath it all, something faintly sweet, and wrong. The smell of flesh, at the edge of rot, masked by fire, and spices. This is where the food of Henry VIII court was made. Not in the elegant chambers you see in paintings, but here, in a factory of heat and smoke staffed by an army of exhausted men and boys. Over 200 of them worked in shifts to feed a household of nearly 1,000 people every single day. The boy takes his place in front of the fire. His job is simple: turn the spit. Keep the meat rotating. Don't let it burn. Do this 4 hours. Do it until your arms shake and your face blisters from the heat. Behind the legendary banquets of Tudor England, the spectacle, the excess, the power displayed on silver platters, was a daily catastrophe. A losing war against decay, fought without refrigeration, without understanding of bacteria, without any real defense, except salt, smoke, and speed. This is the story of what people actually ate at Henry VIII court, and how it was made. Stand in the main kitchen hall, at Hampton Court in 1530. Look up. The ceiling disappears, into darkness, obscured by smoke, that never fully clears. The room is vast, over 50 feet long, but it feels smaller, because of the heat, the bodies, and the constant motion. 6 fireplaces dominate the space. These aren't hearths, they're caverns. Each one is large enough to roast an entire ox. The fires inside them burn day and night, consuming cartloads of oak and beech delivered every morning from the woodyard outside. The flames never die. Letting them go out would mean hours of lost production, and production cannot stop. Watch the turnspit boys. There are a dozen of them stationed in front of the fires, each one assigned to a specific spit. The spits are iron rods as thick as a man's wrist, driven through massive joints of meat, whole sheep, sides of beef, venison haunches the size of a child. The boys turn them using a crank mechanism, slowly and steadily, keeping the meat rotating so it cooks evenly. They work in a crouch or on their knees, as close to the fire as they can bear. The heat is punishing. Their faces are red and slick with sweat. Grease drips from the meat above them and spatters onto the stone floor, sometimes onto their skin. Burns are common, so is heat exhaustion. In summer, boys faint at their posts. This labor is unending. A large joint takes 4 to 6 hours to roast. When one is done, another immediately takes its place. The boys work in shifts, but the shifts are long, their arms ache. Their eyes burn from the smoke. And while they turn meat that will be served to nobles, bishops, and the king himself, they will eat scraps, if they eat at all before their work is finished. Move through the connected rooms. Each one is a specialized department in this factory of food. The boiling house contains massive iron cauldrons hanging over open fires, each one large enough to boil a whole pig. The steam rising from them adds to the suffocating atmosphere. Cooks stir the contents with wooden paddles taller than a man. This is where stews and pottages are made, where bones are boiled down into broth, and where salted meat is soaked and parboiled to draw out some of the overwhelming salt. The pastry kitchen is where pastry cooks work at long wooden tables, rolling dough for pies and tarts. Flour dusts the air, but even here the heat intrudes. The room shares a wall with the main fires, and the temperature makes the butter sweat, and the dough sticky. The flesh larder is a cooler room, relatively speaking, where raw meat hangs from iron hooks, whole deer carcasses, sides of pork, and joints of mutton wrapped in cloth. This is as close to refrigeration as the Tudors get. A north-facing room with small windows and thick stone walls, but it's still not cold. In summer, meat stored here must be used within 2 days, or it begins to turn. The kitchen operates as a single organism. Ingredients flow in from the larders and storage cellars. Prepared dishes flow out toward the Great Hall and the Privy Chambers. In between, over 200 people perform their specialized tasks in a rigid hierarchy. At the top are the clerks of the kitchen, who manage inventory and supervise operations. Below them stands the master cook, responsible for the quality of every dish. Then come the yeoman cooks, the grooms, and the children of the kitchen. At the bottom are the scullions, who scrub mountains of greasy pots and platters in cold water. Their hands are cracked, and bleeding from the harsh lye soap. The noise is constant. Knives chop. Cleavers split bone. Fires hiss, and crackle. Shouted instructions echo off the stone walls. Iron pots clang together. Wooden paddles scrape the bottoms of enormous cauldrons. And over it all hangs the smoke. It pours from the fireplaces, thick with the grease of burning fat. There are louvers in the roof, openings designed to let smoke escape, but they are inadequate. Instead, the smoke lingers, coating everything. The walls are black with soot. The wooden beams overhead are sticky with condensed grease. Every surface, every tool, and every person is covered in a fine layer of grime. The boy at the spit turns the crank. The meat rota. Fat drips into the fire and flares into sudden bursts of flame. He no longer looks at what he's cooking. Instead, he stares at the wall, counting the stones, waiting for his shift to end. This is the engine that powers the spectacle of Henry VIII court. Not a kitchen. A factory. A machine built from fire, flesh, and human endurance, running at the absolute edge of what the technology, and the people operating it, can sustain. A whole deer arrives in the flesh larder at dawn. It was killed yesterday on one of the king's hunting estates, bled and gutted in the field, then transported overnight by cart. The carcass hangs from an iron hook, still cooling. The master cook inspects it. He runs his hand along the flank, checking the firmness of the flesh. Then he leans in close and smells it. Not the surface, but the cavity where the organs were removed. This is where spoilage begins. The smell is clean. Faintly metallic. Acceptable. He marks the carcass with chalk. This deer is destined for the king's table. The venison is butchered with precision. The prime haunch, the largest and most tender cut from the hind leg, is separated and carried on a wooden platter to the privy kitchen. This is Henry VIII's private kitchen. A separate room. A separate staff. Its own master cook. Its own fires. No food enters the king's presence without passing through this tightly controlled and secured space. The privy kitchen operates under different rules. Ingredients are fresher. Supervision is absolute. Every dish is tasted before it leaves the room, not for flavor, but for poison. A yeoman taster samples a small portion and waits. If he shows no signs of distress after several minutes, the dish is approved for service. This system exists because the king's food is a matter of state security. Poison is a real and constant fear. The privy kitchen serves as a final line of defense between Henry and anything that might harm him. The haunch is seasoned with pepper and salt. Not the coarse grey salt used in the main kitchens, but expensive fine-grained salt imported from France. It is roasted carefully over a dedicated fire, turned by a senior yeoman rather than a child. The meat is basted with butter and wine. When it is finished, the exterior is dark and crackling while the interior remains pink and tender. It is carved tableside in the privy chamber. Presented on a polished silver platter. Surrounded by decorative garnishes. The king takes the first slice. The rest of the deer follows a very different path. The shoulder and remaining hind leg are claimed for the first mess, the highest-ranking nobles dining in the great hall. These cuts are excellent. Not as tender as the king's haunch, but still fresh and highly prized. They are roasted in the main kitchen alongside other joints of meat and carried into the hall on large wooden platters by yeoman ushers. The nobles eat manchet bread, fine white bread made from carefully sifted wheat flour. Soft. Light. Expensive. They drink wine, sometimes warmed and flavored with spices. Their portions are generous. Status is measured in abundance. The ribs, the neck, and the lesser cuts are sent to the second mess. This table serves lower-ranking officials, household clerks, and senior servants. The meat is tougher. It is often boiled instead of roasted and served in a thick pottage made with barley or oats. The bread here is cheat bread, coarser, darker, and made from wholemeal flour. Instead of wine, they drink ale. The scraps remain. Bones. Offcuts. Gristle. Dotties are gathered by the scullions and carried to enormous boiling cauldrons. They simmer for hours with onions, herbs, and whatever vegetables are available, producing a thin, greasy broth. This is the meal for the kitchen staff. It is ladled into wooden bowls and soaked up with the coarsest bread in the palace. If peas or beans are available, they are added. If not, the broth must do. By the time the deer has been fully distributed, it has fed. 3 completely different worlds. The boy who spent hours turning the spit that roasted the noble's venison receives none of it. His meal comes much later. After the fires have been damped. After the platters have been washed. He eats standing up, too exhausted to care what it tastes like. This hierarchy is no accident. It is written into the official household regulations. A person's rank determines not only how much they eat, but exactly what quality of food reaches their plate. The difference between manchet bread and cheat bread is the difference between gentleman and servant. The difference between roasted venison haunch and boiled bone broth is the difference between power and invisibility. The king's privy kitchen represents the ultimate expression of this system. It is not simply about serving better food. It is about separation. Control. The visible demonstration that Henry VIII exists in an entirely different category of being than everyone else inside the palace. Even the king's leftovers are carefully regulated. When Henry finishes his meal, the remaining food is distributed according to strict protocol. First to his closest attendants. Then downward through the ranks. Nothing is wasted, but nothing is equal. Food is power made visible. Every meal is a performance of hierarchy. Every plate reminds each person exactly where they stand. And the boy at the bottom, his hands blistered from turning the heavy iron crank, eats only what remains after everyone else has taken their share. The master cook stands in the flesh larder during mid-morning, holding a joint of mutton. He lifts it close to his face and inhales slowly. The meat arrived 2 days ago from a supplier in Suffolk. It has been hanging here ever since, wrapped in cloth to slow the inevitable. The smell is no longer quite right. Not spoiled. Not yet. But no longer truly fresh. There is a faint sweetness beneath the metallic scent of blood. When he presses his thumb into the flesh, it gives slightly. Too easily. In summer, this joint would already be inedible. It is November. He still has a narrow window. He marks the meat with chalk. Roast today. Heavy spicing. This is the master cook's daily gamble. Every piece of meat that enters the flesh larder is already aging. The 3-day rule governs every decision. Fresh meat must be cooked and served within 3 days of slaughter, or the risk becomes unacceptable. But fresh is a relative term. Most meat arrives at the palace already a day old. Sometimes 2. Transport from the markets takes time. Animals are slaughtered elsewhere. The clock is always running. The master cook cannot simply reject questionable meat. The royal household must be fed. Hundreds of people expect their meals. Serving nothing is not an option. Failure could cost him his position. Possibly even his freedom. So he makes calculated compromises. Borderline meat is roasted longer. The exterior is charred to destroy whatever may be growing on the surface. Before cooking, it is rubbed heavily with salt, pepper, cloves, and other expensive spices. When carved, it is served with sharp sauces, mustard, verjuice, and richly spiced gravies designed to overpower the palate. Spices are not merely symbols of wealth. They are tools. Necessities. Pepper and cloves disguise the earliest signs of decay. Saffron restores color to meat beginning to turn gray. Cinnamon and ginger cover the faint sour notes that develop when meat lingers too long in a warm larder. The master cook understands this. Every cook in Hampton Court understands it. It is not considered disgusting. It is simply how the system works. He moves to the next carcass. A side of pork delivered the previous day. He smells it. Presses the flesh. Examines the fat for discoloration. This one is acceptable. He marks it for the great hall. A yeoman suddenly hurries into the room. The fish has arrived. The shipment was expected 2 days earlier. Barrels of cod from the coast, purchased for the upcoming fasting days when meat is forbidden and the court must eat fish. Heavy rain turned the roads into rivers of mud. The cart has been delayed. The barrels have spent 3 extra days traveling without refrigeration. The master cook follows the yeoman into the courtyard. He smells the fish before he even reaches the cart. The barrels are opened. Inside, the cod lies packed in thick layers of salt. Salt slows decomposition. It does not stop it. He lifts one fish by its tail. The flesh remains firm. But the eyes are cloudy. The gills have turned brown. A layer of slime has begun forming across the skin. The smell is powerful. Briny. Sharp. With the unmistakable beginnings of ammonia. He calculates the risk. Reject the shipment. And the royal household has no fish for tomorrow's fast day. Church regulations are absolute. No meat. Only fish. The alternative is bread and pottage. A humiliation for the court of Henry VIII. Accept the shipment. And people may become ill. The responsibility will be his alone. He accepts it. The fish is ordered into fresh water immediately. The soaking will remove some of the salt. Some of the smell. The cooks are instructed to prepare it that very day. Heavily spiced. Covered with thick sauces. There will be no dramatic poisonings. No mysterious deaths. No royal investigation. But across Hampton Court that evening, and throughout the following day, dozens of people will suffer stomach cramps. Many will spend hours in the privy, some will develop fever, they will blame bad humors or eating too much fish. No one will suspect invisible microorganisms multiplying inside warm flesh. No one in 1530 even knows bacteria exist. The master cook returns to his work. His decision has been made. The fish will be served before sunset. The mutton marked earlier that morning, now turns slowly over the main fire. The kitchen fills with the smell of charring meat, and heavy spices. A yeoman bastes it continuously, with wine and melted fat. By the time it is carved, the outside is nearly black. The interior is gray-brown. Cooked completely through. Tough. Aggressively seasoned. It is served without complaint. To everyone in the palace. This is simply what food tastes like. The master cook's greatest enemy is invisible. Not poison. Not fire. Time. Every passing hour allows bacteria to multiply. Every degree of warmth speeds decay. He owns no thermometer. He has no understanding of microbiology. His only tools are his eyes, his hands, his nose, and years of experience. Most days, that is enough. Some days, it is not. The cellars beneath the great kitchens are cold, dark, and heavy with the smell of the sea. Not the clean scent of fresh ocean air, but old brine, stale salt. The concentrated odor of fish packed so tightly into barrels, that the wood itself has absorbed decades of it. This is where the court survival is stored. Not beside the roaring fires above, but here, in the darkness below. Walk between the endless rows of barrels stacked from floor to ceiling. Each one is filled with salted cod, herring, or ling. Fish caught months earlier. Gutted aboard the fishing boats. Then layered with coarse gray salt until the barrels were completely full. The salt draws moisture from the flesh, creating an environment where almost nothing can survive. Almost. Run your hand across one of the barrels. The wood feels damp and sticky. Salt crystals have seeped through the staves, leaving white crusts on the outside. Inside, the fish has been compressed beneath its own weight. And beneath the weight of the salt, the flesh has changed completely. It is hard. Leathery. Closer to wood than fresh food. Before anyone can eat it, the fish must spend days soaking in fresh water. Kitchen servants lower the dried cod into large wooden tubs. The water is changed again. And again. And again. Each change removes only a little of the overwhelming salt. Even after days of soaking, the fish remains intensely salty. It must be boiled. Shredded. Mixed with butter, milk, or eggs. Anything to soften its harsh flavor. This is what the Tudor court eats for nearly half the year. Move deeper into the cellar. Here hang the preserved meats. Entire sides of pork wrapped in salt-crusted cloth. Barrels packed with beef, each layer separated by thick beds of salt. Hams and bacon cured with salt and smoke until they are almost as hard as timber. The process is simple. Fresh meat is coated completely in salt. Packed tightly. Left to cure. The salt pulls out moisture. Without water, bacteria struggle to survive. The meat remains edible. But it is transformed forever. The texture becomes dense. Fibrous. Chewy. The flavor becomes dominated by a single overwhelming taste. Salt. This is not culinary preference. It is survival. Without salt, Henry VIII court could not exist through the winter months. There is no refrigeration. No freezing. No modern preservation. Only salt. The legendary feasts. The mountains of meat. The endless royal banquets. All depend on these barrels hidden beneath the palace. Salt shapes Tudor cooking more than any spice ever could. The heavy gravies. The powerful mustard. The pepper. The cloves. The cinnamon. They are not only disguising meat beginning to age. They are also disguising salt. Every recipe must overcome the reality that its main ingredient has been preserved almost beyond recognition. Above, in the kitchens, a cook lifts a slab of salt pork from a soaking tub. It has been underwater for 2 full days. He slices off a small piece. Tastes it. Still too salty. Without hesitation, he lowers it back into the water.